Welcome back to the Samong Yang Outdoors podcast. This is week and episode number 3. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Samong Yang. I'm joined here by,
I'm Nate. I'm one of the co-hosts.
and this week we want to touch on the best hunting rifle. But before we jump into that, we want to thank our sponsors. First one we want to thank Vortex Optics. They've been a longtime partner of mine, and no matter your budget, whether you got $100 or $2,000 to spend, Vortex Optics have you covered from binoculars, spotting scopes, range finders, you name it, anything optics related, they have you covered.
Another one of our sponsors is Onyx Hunt. They have an awesome mapping software online. It's a great app, super user-friendly. It gives you all the information of public land, private land, topography, burns, clear cuts, all this great stuff. Nowadays, pretty much a necessity when you're hunting.
To round it out, this podcast is also brought to you by Tacticam. Tacticam is the trail cams that we use exclusively. We've run them for the past 3 seasons or so, and we've had excellent luck with them. Very high quality. We have yet to have anything malfunction, and with the way the world's going right now, wireless connection, internet connection is dominating the world. And nowadays with the cellular trail cams, you can set your trail cam up and you don't even have to go check it anymore. When something comes through, the trail cam sends it right to your phone. You can check it right there on the spot of when something comes through.
Absolutely.
So with that said, before we jump into our beautiful podcast, we have a game to play.
We're going to play some Trivia Duel.
Trivia Duel. That's right. This is week number 3 of Trivia Duel. So
I'm enjoying this a lot. I think this part of the podcast is a blast.
So if you're new here, Trivia Duel is a game where I ask Nate a question, and Nate has to answer the question correctly, and vice versa. As of right now, we have no rewards, no consequences, but maybe in the future, maybe by demand from the viewers, there will be a consequence or a reward. So with that said, who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay. Which lake is the largest sanctioned lake in Washington? This is a multiple choice.
Okay.
Is it Lake Chelan, Lake Roosevelt, Lake Washington, or Lake Union?
I have never even heard of Lake Union. Neither have I heard of Lake Washington. Sanctioned lake. Can you define sanctioned?
This was just from the source, the government source that I got this from.
Okay, I have no
I
idea.
think sanctioned because they are sanctioning Lake Roosevelt as a lake, when in reality, it's a reservoir of the Columbia River. Same as like a Banks Lake.
Yes. So sanctioned meaning it's not really a lake, but they're classified or called a lake.
Correct.
I'm going to have to say Lake Roosevelt.
That's correct.
Okay, Lake Chelan is huge, but Lake Roosevelt, I mean, it's essentially the Columbia River. So how can you outbeat one of the largest rivers?
It's just a little bit larger than Lake Chelan.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's a testament to how big Lake Chelan is.
Lake Chelan is huge.
Lake Chelan is very big. I have never been to Lake Chelan. I would love to go visit Lake Chelan one day. That's a great question. My question for you, which state has the largest percentage of public land per capita? Public land as in federally managed lands.
Yep.
Which state, oh, this is multiple choice, by the way.
I don't think I need a multiple choice.
Okay.
Can I guess?
If you want to.
I'm going to go with Nevada.
You nailed it. How do you know that off the top of your head?
Nevada at like 81%. 81.5% is federally managed.
Yes. Well, you're close. The fact that you even have a number blows my mind. Yes, Nevada comes in at first place at 80.1% of its landmass federally managed.
I think Idaho, Alaska, and
Utah is second place at 64.9. Idaho is third at 61.63.
wow.
Alaska is simply just the most. Well, there you go, folks. Nate and I are on a roll. We cannot outsmart each other, apparently. And I promise you, there's no rigging on going behind the scenes. Like, we're really good guessers, I guess.
Maybe.
But with that said, this week on the topic, the best hunting rifle. With the way the schedule is planning out right now, we're approaching fall bear season pretty quick and essentially fall season in general shortly after that. And so we want to get these basic topics out of the way so that anybody who's trying to get in right now gives you a little bit of a direction to go to. So when it comes to the best hunting rifle, the short answer is there's really no best hunting rifle. It's really just a topic, and then we can dissect it however we want to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a simple term, when I say the best hunting rifle, and you can fight with me all you want, but this is what I believe to be the best hunting rifle. The best hunting rifle is the rifle that you own and you shoot the most accurate.
Absolutely.
That is the best hunting rifle. The best hunting rifle is not a brand, is not a model, is not a certain type of gun. It's the one that you shoot the most accurately.
Yeah.
And obviously there's little nuances because you still have to be within the legal spectrum of what you're allowed to use to shoot deer or elk, depending on where you live, right? But if you're in the realm of the legal stuff, the one you shoot the most accurately is the best hunting rifle. Now, we're not going to end it there. We could end it there, but we have a lot
That's
of topics.
it for today, folks. That's the best hunting rifle. Whatever.
There's a lot of things to talk about. I will elaborate as the podcast goes on. But why do I say that the best hunting rifle is the one that you shoot the most accurate? Well, off topic, and I'm not trying to insinuate anything here, but the 22 long rifle, which is often considered a small game cartridge,
it's a plinking round.
Yeah, it's very tiny. Has been used numerous times throughout history with many poaching cases regarding bull elk.
Really?
Yes. The 22 long rifle is often nicknamed the poacher's gun.
I had no idea.
Yes.
This should have been a fast fact.
And the reason why a lot of poachers resort to a 22 long rifle is because it is quiet.
Oh.
A lot of poaching happens at night, and because the 22 is so quiet, nobody hears it. And then they get to go poach. I'm not telling you to go poach. I'm using it as an example to back up my fact that if you're in the legal spectrum, which is often a 6mm cartridge and above, a center fire rifle, if a 22 LR can kill an elk, the most loved or hated 6.5 Creedmoor will kill an elk just fine, right?
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make here. With that said, in the world of hunting cartridges, hunting rifles, it's a giant world. It's a big market. Today, I'm going to share, the both of us, we're going to share kind of a thought process why we choose certain guns, certain calibers, certain cartridges, and why we go about it. And Nate and I, we're kind of polar opposites.
Yeah.
Nate's, you've always been the type of person where you're like, I need one gun and I want it to do everything and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I'm like, this rifle and this cartridge is good for this one purpose. I want another one that can do almost the same thing, but just slightly off.
It's just a great cover for wanting a bunch of guns.
That's really the premise of why I want to talk about this, right? To start at the core of it, when you go about choosing a rifle, let's give a little bit of background as to where you come from, because you have a much more simple answer than I'm going to have, because essentially this whole podcast is just me elaborating on my stuff. But because you've always just been a pretty simple guy when it comes to your rifles.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more of your thought process.
Yeah, I think when I first got into big game, it was also, I didn't own a bunch of bolt action, rifles prior to that. And so I didn't know a ton going in, but I had my priorities, and my priorities were something that I could, like you said earlier, shoot accurately, and something that I could get ammo for, and something that I could get on a fairly reasonable budget. So those were kind of my three guiding principles when I got my first rifle. My first rifle was a Savage Axis 308. I got it from Walmart. I think it was $350, a blued steel barrel, plastic stock. That is the rifle that I shot my first bear with. It's a rifle that I shot this high country deer in 2021 with. That is the rifle that kind of fulfilled those three categories for me. I went into it knowing I was not going to be, at least out of the gate, I was not going to be hand loading, and I still don't hand load. Having a rifle in the .308 caliber, .308 is one of the most widely available rifle calibers on the market. I wanted something that I could find in the affordable, both for the rifle itself and the ammo. You can get rifles in an affordable price range in most calibers, but if you can't afford to shoot the rifle, then that's going to affect the third thing, which is I want something that I can shoot accurately. And there's multiple aspects of this. Because it was a .308, even though it was a cheaper rifle, I had a dozen different ammo options to pick from, and so I was able to find an ammo option that my rifle liked and that I could shoot accurately. I also picked .308 because of recoil. One of the biggest factors with inaccuracy outside of the rifle itself is trigger panic or trigger flinch, anticipating the recoil to where it prevents you from shooting accurately. So getting into hunting, my first rifle was that .308, that Savage Access. My second rifle was just a better .308 because I love .308 so much. I will live and die on the mountain of .308, and I got the Springfield 2020 Waypoint in .308. And that was basically just an upgrade on the technical aspects of the rifle, the barrel length, the weight, the threaded barrel to be able to take a suppressor, some of these things. Since then, I have got some other rifles, but if you tell me to go in and grab a rifle for a hunt, I'm going to go in and grab my .308.
Regardless if it's a black-tailed deer or an elk or a moose.
Absolutely.
It's a .308.
Yeah, because that's the one that I know that I can go in, I can grab it, I can grab the box of ammo that I know it shoots well, and I will be able to go out and shoot, sub them away.
Yeah, and in the worst case, if you find yourself in the middle of nowhere and you're like, oh, dang, I forgot to bring my box of ammo, you probably run into a random little old mom and pop shop. They probably have some .308 ammo sitting there.
Yeah.
Probably not what you're shooting, but they got some .308.
Yeah, and so it's kind of it's a simple answer, maybe not the most popular answer for the gun enthusiast because it is so simple, especially in today's day and age of custom rifles and hand loading and all these new 7 PRC and 7 backcountry and comparing ballistics and having a caliber. And that's a great game to get into. I'm getting into it. It's fun. It's an excuse to shoot different rifles. As far as the hunting aspect, I want, like I said, something that I know that I can reliably shoot.
Yeah. And there you go, the .308 Winchester.
.308 Winchester.
As we will get to shortly, that's one of my favorite cartridges.
Yeah, which I guess this makes it sound like I'm compromising with .308, but by no way am I compromising. .308 is a fantastic. It's this great. It's kind of like a Goldilocks cartridge. I think of it. It's not the best ballistics of all calibers, but it's great ballistics. It's not the lowest recoil out there. It's not a 6.5 Creedmoor, but it's got a great low recoil as compared to a 300 Win Mag. It's not the cheapest ammo out there, but you can get it really cheap and it's widely available. So there's a lot of these factors that the .308 is just kind of sits in that middle section on any chart of being really good, not the best, and not the worst.
Exactly. It just fills the niche of a hunting round.
Absolutely.
And that's why we love the .308. Everybody loves the .308 here at Samong Yang Outdoors.
Absolutely.
We love it.
Made in 1952, right?
Exactly. So with that said, that's kind of my leeway into the topic I wanted to touch on is when you are choosing a hunting rifle, what is the purpose of the hunting rifle? That's the first question that everybody, at least I do, I go in and I say, what is the purpose of this rifle? And if somebody comes up to me and they said, I just want a hunting rifle where I know I can shoot deer, bear, elk, even moose. I just want one rifle to do it all. I know I can shoot it. I know I can afford it. My answer is often .308 Winchester, which is exactly what you just essentially elaborated on. Now, when it comes to the purpose of the rifle, here we hunt. But there's also other reasons why you buy a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for target shooting. Maybe you want to enter PRS competition. Maybe you just want to go out and plink around. right? There's all these different reasons, but for the sake of this topic in this podcast, we're just going to focus on hunting. So now that we said, okay, I want a hunting rifle, there's certain aspects of a hunting rifle that I want. For example, weight. If I'm shooting a rifle that's strictly for PRS or competition, weight is not something I'm worried about. In fact, I actually want more weight in my competition rifle to manage recoil.
Or even if you're just going out to the range and shooting, you don't care that much about weight.
Exactly. So little nuances like that matter when you have dialed in the main reason why you're going to buy a rifle. We're going to use a hunting rifle. And when it comes to hunting rifles, there's different types. The most common today that we pretty much use exclusively is bolt actions. There's also semi-automatics. There's lever actions. But we're going to narrow it down to bolt actions because generally speaking, bolt actions are more accurate and also more reliable. So, hunting rifle, bolt action, okay, that's what we're going with right now. The next thing after you have figured that type of hunting rifle, what cartridge do you chamber it in? So this is a little misconception that people don't realize. Caliber and cartridge are not the same thing. Cartridge refers to the actual load itself. Caliber simply refers to the diameter of the bullet that is the projectile. So when we say cartridge, the .308 Winchester is a cartridge.
Yes.
The 30-06 Springfield is a cartridge. Those are not calibers. The 30-06 Springfield and the .308 Winchester and the 300 Win Mag are all .308 caliber because they shoot the same .308 diameter bullet. Okay, so that's just a little bit of thing. But today, people are so used to saying, what caliber do you want to shoot? But to be, I guess, language correct, cartridge is what we're actually talking about. Caliber is simply just the diameter of the bullet. People use it interchangeably. Doesn't really bother me because that's what we're doing. So with that said, one cartridge / one caliber to do it all for Western big game hunting, elk, maybe moose. We're not talking about grizzly bears and whatnot. We're going to break it down by calibers, and then within each caliber category, we'll give you some cartridges. For me, I would not go any smaller than a .264 inch caliber bullet. So those are your 6.5 millimeters, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5 PRCs, etc. Some people might give me flack for that. People are, well, I love my 25-06. I've taken elk with it. I'm not saying you can't. We've already established that if a 22 LR can kill an elk, anything else bigger than that can probably kill an elk too. But we're talking about not just killing the elk, but also giving it a more ethical shot, right? You can shoot an elk with the 22 LR. He's not going to die right away. He might run a little bit of ways, die a slow, agonizing death. We're not looking for that. We're looking for something that's going to pack enough punch where the elk is going to die in a relatively short amount of time. Again, not saying you can't achieve with the 25 Creedmoor or a 243 or 6mm Creedmoor of that sort. We're just trying to be a little bit more on the ethical side of things. So the 264s, when it comes to that family, I essentially have one, and there's some, when I'm choosing my cartridges here, kind of like you, there's certain things I'm looking at. Ammo availability. If it's a one-off cartridge, I'm not going to pick it because the average person is probably not going to be able to find ammo, or it's insanely expensive to get around or to get a box of 20. We're looking at ammo availability, the common, how many rifles are actually being chambered in it, how many rifles can you just run to the store and potentially even buying it, right? And so with that said, with the market's kind of driving, some of these cartridges are relatively new. With the 264 caliber family, I have one cartridge, and that is the 6.5 PRC. I do not have the 6.5 Creedmoor on here because, in all honesty, I don't think the 6.5 Creedmoor is what I would deem an elk gun. Can it be done? Absolutely. I've seen it be done. But again, for the most part, I think it's on the smaller end of things. The 6.5 PRC on average shoots about 200 feet per second faster than the 6.5 Creedmoor, which I think, even though it's only 200 feet per second, I think that buff of extra velocity, extra muzzle velocity, extra muzzle energy, it just kind of narrowly bumps it up to what I would deem an elk gun. An example is this past year, 2024, my uncle took his bull elk at 400 yards with a 6.5 PRC. Elk stood on his feet for about 10 seconds and rolled off the hill, right? Double long
Ethical.
shot. Yeah, ethical. 2021, my dad took his first ever branch bull elk in Northeast Washington with a 6.5 PRC. Both my uncle and my dad are shooting the Hornady Precision Hunter 143 grain EODX bullet. My dad had a full-on frontal with this bull elk at about 250 yards. My dad put it right in his jugular. Bullet went through, heart shot him. The bull ran like 30 yards, tipped over dead. So it's a testament to the 6.5 PRC.
Mhm.
It's a great gun. It's a great cartridge. It's still on the smaller side of elk, but with what I have personally seen it do and looking at the ballistics of it,
And the
It's
reason you're referring all of this to elk is because if someone's asking for a Western big game cartridge, do it all, elk is generally the biggest thing that you're going to be hunting consistently.
Yeah.
Sure, you could be hunting moose, but that's a whole different game because that's not something that you're going to be hunting
Exactly.
consistently.
Elk is the most common large game that you're hunting in the Western United States.
Yeah.
So the 6.5 PRC, it's relatively cheap. It's not the cheapest, but it's $50 to get 20 rounds. It's pretty common. You go to a store, you could probably find 6.5 PRC, and not just one load. I mean, multiple manufacturers are loading for the 6.5 PRC. There's numerous different rifle brands and models that are being chambered in 6.5 PRC. And so realistically, if you buy 6.5 PRC, you can get ammo for it at a relatively cheaper price. And the truth is, it's just a good cartridge. I really love my 6.5 PRC. I've personally taken 2 elk with it. In fact, my biggest bull right here that's hanging next to me right here, he was taken with a 6.5 PRC, right? That's the only one I would put in the 264 caliber. 26 Nosler, for example, it shoots way faster, but it's a niche cartridge. You're really not going to find ammo for it other than Nosler loading for it. And if you know anything about Nosler ammunition, they are not cheap. You're probably paying about $120 for a box of 20 26 Nosler rounds. So 264s, 6.5 PRC, that's my only recommendation. We'll jump up one to the .277 calibers, so the 270 family. I have 2. I have the tried and true Jack O'Connor Special 270 Winchester, and also the revamped 270 Winchester Short Mag. Do I really need to elaborate on the 270? I think the 270.
I don't think so.
The 270 speaks for itself. It's common. You can find ammo almost anywhere. Rifles, you can find almost anywhere. Many different ammo manufacturers are loading for it, and they're kind of like a 308 where it's cheap. I just ordered some new 270 Winchester ammunition, and the cheapest box I got for 20 was $23.
Wow,
Can you believe that?
that's
In
unbelievable.
2025, I got a box of 270 for $23. It's a little over $1 per round. Most of the times now, you're not getting that.
Which an obvious statement would be that means for $60, you can go out and put about 60 rounds for your rifle. Whereas if you were shooting, say, 7 backcountry, a new round, you're probably going to be paying $60 to shoot about
20.
maybe 20 rounds for your rifle.
Yeah. And so again, it goes back to my point. Is it readily available? Is it cost effective? And can you actually find the rifle? And the 270 checks it all. The 270 short is not as common, but if you just do your research, it's around. There's multiple manufacturers, rifle manufacturers that are loading for it. Tikka, I know Bergara, some like Browning, like they still make rifles chambered in 270 Winchester short mag. And if you look for ammo, you're probably not going to find it at any retail store around here. But if you Google it, there will be some places where they have it and they can ship it to you.
Mhm.
So it's still readily available. It's just not as common, which is why I kind of put it there, and I put a little asterisk next to it because it's not fully there, but it's enough there where I can say, if you have a 270 Winchester short, you can probably make it happen.
Yeah.
Next up, we go up to the 7mm, the 284 diameter bullets. And this is probably one of my favorites. So growing up, as crazy as it sounds, the 7s are really new to me. The first time I ever shot a 7 was in 2023 when I got my 7 PRC. Other than that, I've always been a 308 guy, a 308 caliber, or a 6.5 caliber guy. So the sevens are really new to me, and I'm kind of bummed that I didn't start earlier because they're one of my favorites. And when it comes to this family, because it's so popular, many manufacturers are coming out with different stuff. But in the last few years, we've seen a surge of 7 millimeter cartridges coming out.
Yeah.
With this, the smallest 7 millimeter I'm going to recommend is the 7 millimeter '08 Remington. This is essentially the 308 Winchester neck down to shoot a 7 millimeter bullet. Same exact case, same exact powder capacity, same everything. It's just that it's shooting a 7 millimeter bullet instead of a 308 bullet. It's capable for elk. Not my first choice, but I throw it into my list of what you could use.
And so as you're stepping up here on your calibers, what's the advantage that comes with as you're going bigger,
Yes.
bigger and bigger and bigger? What are the things that are changing? Velocities, recoils, bullet diameter causing size of impact, things like that.
Yes. So when it comes to caliber, again, this refers to the bullet diameter, the actual projectile that's flying and hitting your target. The advantage of going to a higher or a bigger caliber is when you hit the animal, you have a bigger wound channel because this bullet simply is displacing more surface area. And not only that, when you shoot, especially for hunting grade ammunition, the bullet expands. So it's not just a little bit of a 277 going up to a 308. You have to multiply that number by like 1.5, right? So when you multiply it by 1.5, that's a pretty big difference in terms of wound channels, right? That's the biggest advantage of going up in caliber.
Which that was one of the reasons why I chose a 30 caliber.
Yes.
With 308.
Yeah, and to touch on that, some animals do not bleed well. Black bears, for example, especially in the fall when they have their winter coats and their hairs are extremely long. If you poke a little hole in them, one, that's just less area for blood to flow out of, right? And on top of that, it's soaking on all these hair. Whereas if you put like a 338 caliber bullet through a bear, that's a significantly bigger hole for blood to come out. So if an animal doesn't drop on the spot, you can at least have a more reliable blood trail to go find that animal wherever it expired. That's the biggest advantage of jumping up a caliber. Many times when you're shooting these bigger calibers, per weight of the bullet, it has lower ballistics coefficient, lower BC. So if you take a 175 grain 308 bullet and a 175 grain 284 bullet, that 284 bullet will have better ballistics. It will drift less in the wind. It'll cut the wind better, essentially, and it'll have less drop because there's less friction when it's going through the air.
Which, going back to your kind of in the middle of your 7 millimeter talk, that's the ballistic coefficient. The BC is a huge reason why the 7 millimeter cartridges have been on this surge the last couple of years.
And to bring it back to earth, for the most part, if you're hunting in common hunting ranges, it doesn't really matter. If you're shooting a 308 and a 7 millimeter '08 out to 300 yards, like the difference is so marginal, you don't worry about it. With what you and I do, sometimes we do have those slightly extended shots, 400 yards, 450 yards sometimes. And having every little ballistic advantage can go a long way because not every shot goes perfect. Sometimes we're in the heat of the moment, adrenaline is pumping through us. We don't have the fundamentals to consciously tell us, pull the trigger correctly. Sometimes we get excited, we jerk the trigger, and that throws something off. And if you have all these advantages in your favor, that's less of a margin of error for something to go wrong downrange.
Right.
That's the advantage of downsizing to a smaller cartridge from like a 308 to a 7 millimeter, or even from a 7 millimeter down to a 6.5 millimeter.
Yeah, I can almost equate it to. I actually did more archery hunting before rifle hunting, and it's pretty similar to the idea of shooting a 3-fletched arrow versus a 4-fletched arrow. It's a lot of, you lose some of the punch maybe, but you get a little bit more of the error ability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same type of concept, if you will.
Yeah.
So with that said, back to the topic, 7 millimeter '08 Remington, that's the smallest 7 millimeter I would recommend. And again, same concept. It's a very common cartridge. ammo is readily available, and it's very mild recoiling. If you have a youth shooter, a youth hunter, or somebody who's simply smaller framed, a 7mm '08 Remington is like perfect.
Yeah.
I would choose the 7mm '08 Remington and the 308 Winchester over a 6.5 Creedmoor any day of the week for hunting, realistic hunting scenarios. Usually no more than 400 yards.
Yeah.
To go up a little bit more, we jump big. We go from the 7mm '08 Remington to the 7mm Remington Magnum. And this thing is a beast. I mean, we're talking about, I think, 150 grain bullets going well over 3,000 feet per second, right? Like this thing is essentially shooting a mini cannon. What else is there to be said about the tried and true proven 7 mag? It's got the ballistics. Anybody who goes elk hunting with the 7 mag will never get the reaction of, why are you hunting elk with that cartridge? Most of the time, it's great cartridge.
Yeah.
Because it's just that good. Following the 7 mag, 7 PRC. This is the new kid on the block. Ballistically, the 7 mag and the 7 PRC, they're almost identical. 7 PRCs kind of had this weird arc lately where it's not shooting up to what Hornady has been advertising it to shoot, 3,000 feet per second.
Mm-hmm.
It's shooting like 2,800 feet per second. It's a rabbit hole, but let's just take the 3,000 feet per second at Hornady's word and let's say it's true. It's ballistically superior to the 7 mag because the 7 mag, back when it was designed, it was not designed to shoot these heavy bullets. Like a 175 grain bullet is extremely heavy for a 7mm. So 7 mag, 160s, 162 grain type bullets, that's usually the heaviest. 7 PRC, when Hornady came out with it, it was designed to shoot those heavier 4 caliber bullets, like the 175 grain ELDX.
Yeah.
When you put a 175 grain ELDX in a 7 PRC, and let's say it's theoretically shooting 3,000 feet per second, across the board to like a common 160 grain 7 mag, the 7 PRC is superior in every aspect. Muzzle velocity, muzzle energy, you name it. Those are the 3 that I chose for the 284s. And you got a 7 PRC last year.
I did, yeah. I started shooting a custom 7 PRC from OMR, from Oregon Mountain Rifle. It was a great experience. And we'll get into this at some point on this podcast of mitigating kind of the downsides of larger calibers like recoil, which affect accuracy with either a muzzle brake or a suppressor. But I was shooting a 7 PRC this last year, suppressed to mitigate some of that recoil and sound, obviously. And I had a fantastic experience with it.
Yes.
I was able to, even though it was not shooting, like you said, kind of up to box standard, I actually was shooting not a Hornady load ELDX, but a Federal load ELDX, and was getting darn close to that 3,000 foot per second standard, which given is probably out of a 22 or 24 inch barrel, I would guess.
You have
But I was shooting it out of a 20 inch barrel where you sacrifice a little bit of an expected sacrifice of a little bit of velocity.
The 7 PRC, if I'm not mistaken, is box velocity is being tested out of a 24 inch barrel.
Okay.
Yes.
I was getting 2890 or 2901, right around there with my 20 inch barrel with my Federal loads of 175 grain bullet, which if you put the ballistics on paper, that's fantastic. Yeah. And I shot my blacktail down in Oregon with that this last year, and that deer was all rutted up and
full pass through.
It did great.
Yes, those are my 284s. The last one I'm going to stop at is the 308s because I've never really dabbled with anything bigger than a 308 caliber. Here are my 4 options when it comes to 308 that I don't think you can go wrong when it comes to Western big game. We've already touched on this one, the 308 Winchester. You cannot go wrong with it. Common, very common, readily available, relatively inexpensive to shoot. It has the whole market support. Next, I'm going to one-up it, 30-06 Springfield. This was my first ever rifle I bought for myself. And I've taken numerous animals with it. It's essentially a 308, just with a little bit more powder capacity, shoots a little bit faster, shoots the same exact bullets. You cannot go wrong with a 30-06. Everybody here knows a 30-06. The last 2, the 300 Winchester Magnum and the 300 Winchester Short Magnum. They're essentially ballistically twins. Shoots essentially the same muzzle velocity, same energy in a Magnum format. What else is there need to be said about that stuff, right? The 300 Win Mag, if you're hunting elk with it, I think it's perfect elk medicine for that stuff. And if you compare as apples can be, the 7 PRC and the 300 Winchester Magnum are like identical.
As you're kind of talking about this 300 Win Mag, 7 Rem Mag, now you're kind of getting into this realm of people saying, why are you using that caliber on smaller animals? So kind of where we started at, with 6.5 PRC, maybe people questioning that as an elk cartridge. If you go on a whitetail doe hunt and you're trekking around your 300 Win Mag, you might get some funny looks.
There's no such thing as too dead.
Yeah, you're not going to be undergunned.
Yeah, you're not going to be undergunned, right? I mean, a 300 Win Mag might seem excessive to a doe, but the thing about these bigger guns, especially if you hand load, is you can always download it, like underload the load so it shoots a little slower.
Yeah.
But you can't necessarily overload a 6.5 PRC, for example, to make it shoot faster. Right? So there's pros and cons to it. But I know plenty of people who have taken whitetail does with the 300 Win Mag.
Mm-hmm.
My first deer I shot with a 300 Short Mag at 20 yards. So it's like, it's doable. And really, when it comes to meat loss, like if you're not hitting bone and you're just shooting behind the armpit through the lungs, most of the time you're not going to notice too much of a difference.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes when you're hitting a major bone where you're going to see significant meat loss.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of a rundown of calibers from the smallest that you'd kind of recommend up to the large. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, no matter the caliber, looking at your rifles, what are some of those features that you're looking for in a hunting rifle? So
the first thing I'm going to consider is the weight of the rifle. Today, a 6 to 8 pound rifle, and I'm talking about bare rifle, nothing on the rifle. 6 to 8 is pretty common. Mm-hmm. 6 pounds is on the lighter end. 7 is pretty much the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. 8 pounds is on the heavier side, but it's still not overly excessive. Right. That's typically where I start looking at. Once you go past that weight, then I start looking at features of the rifle. The most common one nowadays I look at is it threaded? Is the barrel threaded? Most rifles now, at least the direction that the industry is going, is starting to go that way. Tikka, for example, for the longest time, this was my biggest gripe about them, not threaded.
Right.
2025, every Tikka is coming threaded now.
That was massive.
And I am so excited. So I was going to buy a Tikka first thing this year, and then I heard that announcement, and I'm like, I'm waiting until those hit the shelves. I'm going to go buy those.
Yeah.
The advantage of a threaded muzzle is you can put a suppressor on, or you could put a muzzle brake on. Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier, recoil is often something that people have to think about. A muzzle brake and a suppressor will greatly reduce felt recoil.
I don't want to be another one of those people just singing the praises of saying, "Oh, I'm never going to go back once I started shooting a suppressor," and really beat a dead horse. But I will genuinely say that the last year's edition of hunting with a suppressor was a significant change in my ability to hunt accurately for the disadvantages of the weight. Like 2022 was a great example. No, 2023 in our Oregon hunt, that first shot that we were misranged and I shot way not close to the animal, having the suppressor 100% allowed me to get that second shot off without spooking the animal. And so you mentioned threaded barrel. That is right up there for me with weight. In fact, if I had two options, same rifle, and one was a bit heavier with no threaded barrel, or one was a bit lighter with no threaded barrel, and one was a bit heavier with a threaded barrel, I would be hard-pressed not to go with the threaded barrel.
Yeah, today when I look at rifles, if it's not threaded, it's already an automatic
It's
no.
like not an option.
It's like, come on, like catch up here.
Yeah.
Because it's better to have it and not need it than want it or need it and not have it.
Yeah, and another thing too is if you look on paper, people ask, "Oh, why are you using a suppressor when they're so much heavier when you could use a muzzle brake and get even more recoil?" I very much appreciate the hearing safe. I've made mistakes when I was younger and lost some hearing during hunting. And so it's not something that I'm willing to play around with anymore. And I still shoot with hearing protection when I'm out at the range shooting with my suppressor, but it's not something I have to think about out on the hunt when I'm hunting with my suppressor. And it really does make a big difference. It makes a big difference communicating with your hunting partner or your spotter when you and I are hunting together. If I don't have earplugs in, it is way easier to communicate before and after the shot. And I think not having hearing protection, but also not putting my hearing at risk in that hunting scenario does add to an increased success.
Exactly, which is why a threaded muzzle is so important.
Yes.
Next up, a feature that I look for, and this is not as important as a threaded muzzle. It's not a necessity, but if you had a rifle with these features and a rifle that did it and everything else was the same, even if the rifle with these extra features costed an extra $100 to $200, I'd lean that way. And that is adjustability, meaning you can adjust the cheek riser so that you have better line of sight through your scope, faster target acquisition, as well as having spacers between your buttstock and the recoil pad itself to allow you to adjust the length of pull. Having the ability to really customize that rifle to fit you, that's a plus. Is it absolutely necessary for me? No. But I've used rifles without those options and with those options, and the amount of comfort difference that I feel between no adjustability and adjustability, night and day difference.
Well, and a nice thing about those options too, more so with the cheek riser than the length of pull, if you find a rifle that has everything you want, but it doesn't maybe have a cheek riser, just like we did with your Weatherby Live Wild Mark V,
Yep.
you can buy. That's something that you can add on to your rifle, either with like a neoprene sleeve or with an actual like screwed in adjustable cheek riser, which is a great option for a lot of rifles that don't have that added as part of the rifle.
And to touch on that, yes, you can thread your muzzle aftermarket. However, that's expensive. Adding a cheek riser is not that expensive. And on top of that, a lot of factory rifles without the threaded muzzle factory, you can't thread it because the barrel's too thin.
Correct.
And so like there's nuances that you have to look at. So factory rifles gotta come factory threaded. If it has the option to adjust the length of pull or the cheek riser, that's a plus. Is it mandatory? No. I shoot plenty of rifles without any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are essentially the only features that I'm looking at. In terms of functionality, these are more like, does the bolt cycle? Obviously, a bolt has to cycle properly and reliably for me to take it hunting, right? Most of them function well, but if the rifle, for whatever reason, doesn't function, then you overlook it.
Well, it's funny, one thing that comes to mind with the bolt functioning is you had a couple years there with a rifle that did not function great with the bolt, and when you switch to your 6.5 PRC, the Savage, and you can actually see this if you go back and watch your 2022 elk. It cycled great, but you were in the mindset of you shot and then you checked like 1, 2, 3 times to see if you actually had another round in there.
Yeah. So that's actually on this deer right here. So this is my 2022 Washington mule deer. I set up my Savage 110 Ultra like 3 days before I went on this hunt, and I shot him, dropped him, racked a second one in, ran over to the deer. So stoked I got the deer, and then I went to go pull the round out because I killed the deer. That's when I figured out that the second one didn't even rack.
Yeah.
So like I basically racked nothing on my second chambering, but it threw me off because many times when you shoot and you go to eject your first round, the moment that shot or that spent casing ejects, your bolt is ready for the second one. That's not the case with the Savage 110 Ultralight. When that round or that shell ejected, I was just thinking like put the second one in, but it didn't. That bolt on the 110 Ultralight, at least mine, has to hit the full back wall before it's ready to catch the second one and put it in. It's still reliable if you do it right, but it's just another step that you have to be conscious of.
Yeah.
Ever since then, I haven't had that issue, right? So maybe it was just a matter of that the rifle was so new, everything was so clunky at that time that you just had to have it perfect. That's why 2 weeks later when I shot this bull, The moment I shot, I racked the second one in. The first thing I did was reopen my bolt to check in. It did chamber it, but I had to double check, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of things like that, it's like you can't really know when you're just looking at a rifle off the shelf. So when I'm saying like these are the features I'm looking at, these are just the things that you can know just by simply observing it. I didn't know that my 110 ultralight didn't reliably feel like that until I actually used it, right? So it's a little bit, we're comparing kind of like apples to oranges here, which is why I'm like, these are the features you want, and this is just something that I didn't know until I actually got the rifle. Because you can't look at a rifle and be like, oh, that rifle's not going to feed well by looking at the rifle. The next thing that I want to talk about is choosing a bullet for your hunting rifle, because your bullet is very important. Using the wrong bullet can cost you animals, and I've had that happen before, where bullets, they just don't work, right? Like you shoot them, you think they're dead, they run off, you never find them. So there's two types of bullets. There's monolithic bullets, where it's copper only, there's no lead inside, and then there's more commonly lead core bullets, where there's lead inside the bullet, but it's usually in like copper casing or some type of other metal. The advantages of monolithic bullet is you simply don't have lead. So when you shoot an animal, you don't have these lead particles that just shoot off into the meat and you're consuming lead. On top of that, when you have your carcass, if you have a carcass full of lead fragments, it can also kill birds of prey like hawks and eagles and whatnot, because there's many studies coming out today where they're finding out that a lot of hawks and animals that consume carcasses that have been shot with lead core bullets are dying because of lead poisoning, right? So it's an environmental thing that you have to take into consideration now, that when you're shooting a lead-free or lead core bullet, that's some of the consequences of it. The more practical or functional benefits of a monolithic bullet is they penetrate very well. They expand and they kind of mushroom, but they penetrate better because they hold their weight so well. Whereas lead core, depending on how the bullet is designed, if you shoot it, the lead comes apart and the bullet itself is like two different pieces. So that can lead to not having as good of penetration, which if you have an off angle shot like an elk, like quartering to, that penetration is going to tell you everything, because you need that penetration to go from his front shoulder all the way through his vitals. That's where a monolithic bullet might outwin a lead core bullet.
Right. But that's not necessarily always how monolithic bullets perform.
With today's market, like there's all these different designs, but for the vast majority of monolithic bullets, they're designed to mushroom, like Barnes, for example.
Yeah.
If you look at them, hammer bullets, for example, they're designed to mushroom and then eventually shed those petals or those mushrooms, right? Different designs, but I'm just speaking from a very general standpoint here. That's the advantages of a monolithic bullet. There are some states like California and certain regions throughout various states where you have to use lead-free bullets. You cannot use lead core bullets. So sometimes it's a necessity out of a legality status. Sometimes people just don't like the environmental aspect of it, where they're like, I'm killing hawks and eagles that are eating the deer that I shot and I left behind. The advantages to lead core bullets is they're very common and you can find them almost anywhere, and they're just dominating the market right now. They're often cheaper too, but again, the biggest consequence that you're going to pay for that is you have this environmental factor that you have to take into consideration. The other thing too with monolithic bullets that you have to be aware of is they require they require higher velocities to expand reliably. So if you're taking shots at longer distances, a monolithic bullet may not be your best choice because it's not hitting that animal fast enough and it's not expanding reliably. Whereas lead core, because it's softer, they can still reliably expand at extended ranges.
Yeah.
With that said, Nate and I, we both have killed numerous animals with both monolithic and lead core bullets. Some of my favorite bullets, I'm just going to kind of shoot them out here, are these ones right here. So starting with monolithics, the Barnes LRX. When I say copper bullets, I tend to think Barnes LRX. For us, we've been using more of the TTSX, which is essentially an outdated LRX. And LRX is essentially a TTSX, but with how they designed it, maybe the materials they're using, it's designed to be a little softer, so it still reliably expands at farther distances as opposed to the TTSX.
Mm.
The TTSX is also one of them. It kills. We haven't seen the quickest of all the kills in our life, but it still, for the vast majority of it, it still reliably kills.
Yeah.
As long as we do our job. The other one is the Hammer Hunters. I have yet to kill anything with it. I missed a bear in 2022 with it, but those things are extremely accurate. Those are my first hand loads that I'm shooting out of my 30-06, and extremely accurate. I want to shoot something with it this year. Very expensive, and oftentimes those are bullets that you have to hand load. So if you don't hand load, disregard. Lead core bullets, these are the most common ones. I have a variety of here that I have personally used and also seen people taken. Hornady ELDX. I probably just lost half my viewers. The ELDX is, you either love it or you hate it. The ELDX, from my personal experience, both using it and seeing buddies use it, has always been good. I have not seen anything go bad or go wrong with an ELDX bullet. I've seen elk get shot with an ELDX. Again, my uncle last year with his bull elk with the 6.5 PRC, the 143 grain ELDX, 10 seconds, done. My dad's bull in 2021, frontal at 250 yards, ELDX, frontal, pierced it through, recovered the bullet like basically right above his stomach after like going through his heart and like his jugular. It's been a good bullet. I took my first elk over here 500 yards with that bullet. Punched his shoulder, double lunged him on the first shot. He reacted like nothing happened. I thought I missed. Started shooting again. Fourth shot, got lucky. I necked him as he was running. And I'm thinking I only hit him on the fourth shot, right? I got over there. I was like, dude, his lungs are blown up. And it was like, how did I hit him in the neck and also hit him in the lungs? Like, that's with the way the elk was positioned, there's no way it was possible. I hit him twice. Broke through his shoulder blade at 500 yards with the Hornady ELDX 178 grain out of a 30-06. Killed him just fine. Good record. I recommend it. 7 PRC. We both, obviously, you used it last year. I used it 2 years ago on my mule deer and my blacktail. Flawless. No issues at all with the ELDX. Anything to add on the ELDX?
No, this was my first year shooting ELDX out of the 7 PRC, and
It's good.
I had a great experience. Yeah, my deer went 30 yards.
Following that, Nosler AccuBonds. These are, I guess, the pinnacle of a lead core bullet. Can't say enough good things about them. The damage that I've seen people use AccuBonds on have been what you would expect from a lead core bullet. A little bit more expensive because it's a Nosler. The third one, the Nosler ballistic tip. The remaining 50% of you are probably gone now too.
Now we're talking to nobody.
Yes. The Nosler ballistic tip, I think it has a big misconception with people who are in the space. Back then, I wasn't really familiar, but back then, from what I've been hearing, the ballistic tip, when you shoot it, it fragments. But I think over the years, Nosler has changed it to now it just cup and cores. It just mushrooms, and it holds very well. This bull elk that I shot up here, as well as my Oregon Roosevelt, I shot him with the 6.5 PRC 140 grain ballistic tip on both of them. Same with this guy. And I didn't recover the bullet on this bull, but I recovered both my bullets on the Oregon Roosevelt that I shot, like at 250 yards. Cup and core bullet. Perfect, beautiful mushroom. Killed the elk just fine, right? Killed this guy. I shot this guy twice. I missed the first shot. Didn't hit him. Second shot, shot him at 200 yards. Like he was like walking, shot him at 200 yards. He went 30 yards, sat behind a tree, expired. And again, that's out of 6.5 PRC.
Yeah.
So the Nosler ballistic tip, one, it's one of the most affordable bullets you can find at Nosler, and it's also been one of the most accurate bullets that I have shot out of my rifles.
And I was actually planning to shoot the Nosler, either the AccuBond or the ballistic tip, out of my 308. I do with my rifles. I grab, 3-4 boxes of ammo of different loads, and it just what they weren't shooting in my specific rifle as well as the TTSX were. Not to say that they don't shoot well. They were all shooting great. The TTSX just had a little bit of an edge, and again, I prioritize accuracy pretty highly.
Oh. Fourth, probably one of my favorite bullets, the Federal Terminal Ascent 2024, I used the terminal ascent exclusively just because I wanted to use it. And every single thing I've shot at has been a full pass through. And the damage has been excellent. Never could recover a bullet because the terminal ascent's kind of like a hybrid between a monolithic and like lead. So it has a lot less lead than like a Accubon, for example, but it still has a little bit of lead in it and extremely accurate. Great bullet penetration. Penetrates like a monolithic, but performs like a lead core. When you look at the wound channel, you know it did some serious damage in there.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have a bullet to show, and I wish I could recover it, but nothing but good things. Everything I've shot at it with has died, as long as I hit it. The last one, this one's new to me. This is the first time I saw it used was my little cousin Chris. He took his black bear this year with me. He was using the Norma Bond Strike out of his X5 PRC, and that thing completely blew through that bear. Shot him behind the left shoulder, perfect spot, and like because he was like quartering away, the bullet like passed through on his shoulder, his right shoulder.
Really?
And it blew a giant hole through that shoulder.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, I was like, that's a lot of damage for a 6.5 millimeter caliber bullet.
Was it a Creedmoor or a PRC?
It's a PRC.
He was shot with the
But
PRC.
the wound channel itself, like that's why I was sold on it. It's not really like, oh, it just penetrated. It's like the wound channel, that what it did on that bear, like it's like that's impressive. So those are 5 of the ones that I recommend for lead core. Obviously, there's great other options, but for what I have used recently, those are my recommendations.
Yeah.
Moving on top of a rifle, you need a scope. And this one, I'm going to run through it. There's all different types of scopes. 2 to 10s, 3 to 9s, 3 to 12s, 4 to 12s, 5 to 25, etc. Nate and I, with how we hunt, we try to keep our shots under 500 yards, preferably under 400 yards. Sometimes we have no options but to take those longer shots. Sometimes a shot opportunity presents itself at 30 yards.
Yeah.
So with how we set up our rifles, we want one rifle to be able to cover that whole spectrum. If a 50-yard shot presents itself, we want to be able to do it effectively. If a 500 yards presents itself, we want to be able to do that as well. So what do you use, and tell us a little bit why?
I use the Vortex Razor LHT. It's a 4.5 to 22 by 50. That's what I have on both my 308 and my 7PRC. For me, optics, I wanted the same thing going from rifle to rifle. I like consistency, as you know. And so as where you kind of like to try out all the options on your different rifles, if I find something that works really well for my style and the kind of hunting I'm doing, that's the one I'm going to stick with. So I have that same scope on both my rifles. And like you were saying, it goes down to 4.5 power. I feel more than capable enough doing timber hunting with that. I have a great field of view, and it goes all the way up to 22 power. So like this last fall when I shot my blacktail at 400 yards, I did not feel like I was under magnified at all. Another thing I like about that scope, just kind of as a feature of Vortex, it's a really light scope. Yep. In the world of scopes. Does have the option, you have an illuminated reticle, which is great for some scenarios. I didn't end up actually using it last year, but practicing with it, it's a great tool to know that you have in your belt.
That in and of itself, Nate and I, we run the same. For the most part, we run the same. Our lowest magnification usually is between 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Our max zoom is usually between 18 and 25, depending on the scope model. So if you have a 2 to 10, like a 3 to 9, to me, I would deem that as a rifle scope that is suitable for hunts where you're not usually shooting over 300 yards. A low magnification of around 3 to 5, and a max zoom of about 18 to 24, I think is the perfect do-it-all from 50 yards all the way out to 500 yards. You're not over-zoomed at 3 or 4 power for those close shots, but you're not under-zoomed when you're taking those longer 400 or 500 yard shots.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go one step above 5 to 25, 5 to 30, 6 to 36, whatever. Those are often more suited for hunts where you know you're probably not going to get a shot under 300 yards. Yeah. Those more open prairie type hunts, or you really just like to get up close and choose that one single hair on a deer. Really, you can make anything work, but Nate and I, we like to just try to be middle of the ground where we know if we're on low power, we can make it happen. If we need to do a longer shot, we can use that stuff. So 3 to 15, 4 to 16, 3 to 18, 4 to 20. That's my type of jam when it comes to building the one hunting rifle that I'm going to use.
Yeah.
Just some features of the scopes that I look at, and you kind of touched on it. Parallax, it's got to have a parallax now. The parallax is, you can think of it as a focus, but it's not really a focus. So what it does, it is the parallax, depending on your range, right? It's going to line up your reticle to that image. So it's going to put it on the same plane. That way, you know that that reticle is looking exactly where you're looking on the image. Scopes that lack the parallax features are usually lower end scopes where they're set at 100 yards. So if you have a scope that doesn't have parallax and you have like a deer at 20 yards, for example, that crosshair is going to come off very blurry because they're not on the same plane. That's why I like a parallax, because again, we're shooting various distances. I want to always have a very sharp crosshair, and I know that it's on the same plane as my target. Zero stop. This is another feature that the scope must have. A zero stop basically allows your top turret, your elevation turret, to hit a hard wall when you're back at zero. So you and I both zero our rifles at 100 yards. So what that means is when we shoot at 100 yards, we're hitting dead in the bullseye. When you're shooting at 500 yards, you're often dialing up to like 8 or 10 MOA. It's not really that much of a change, but sometimes when you're out there, so many things going on, you forget what revolution you're on because you might have spun it the wrong way. And so just having that peace of mind, be like, I hit the hard wall, I know this is my zero, and I know if something pops out at 100 yards, I'm going to hit it. Peace of mind.
Or if you're at the range and you're practicing out to say 800 or 900 yards because you're at the range and you're shooting at steel and you're dialing your turret more than one rotation, more than one complete rotation, and then you don't have a zero stop and that's your last trip before you go hunting, it's very easy to accidentally dial back to 1-0. That is one complete rotation.
Yeah, you might
of
be
your
hitting
turret.
like 28 MOA off if you have the wrong zero.
And you're gonna out in the rain, with your adrenaline pumping out on the hunt, you're gonna check your scope, and it's gonna be at whatever MOA you dialed. And so that's a big way to kind of mess up if you don't have a zero stop.
Yes.
It's a nice thing to be avoided.
Last, a feature that I look for, it's not mandatory. Illumination helps with low light conditions when you can't really see your crosshair. Hit that button, illuminates your reticle, and you can just see your crosshair a lot better. Yeah. Again, not mandatory. Most of my shots I don't shoot with illumination on, but it's nice to have. That's really the rifle that we tend to lean towards when we're building a hunting rifle. We've run through the type of rifle, bolt action hunting rifle. We ran through all the different cartridges that I would recommend for somebody looking for one rifle to come out and cover all the Western hunting spaces. Features of the rifle, threaded muzzles, all that stuff. Even the scope, that's what we're looking at. Now, I want to touch on some things to close out the podcast that will help you be more efficient with your hunting rifle now. And so the first topic we're going to talk about is ways to improve your accuracy. What's the most common way to improve your accuracy? Practice. You have to go shoot your rifle to be accurate with your rifle.
Yeah, and kind of like I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, I knew that back when I got my first hunting rifle, because I was not used to shooting larger caliber rifles, I knew that I was going to have to shoot a lot to become efficient, to become accurate, not necessarily for the rifle to become accurate, but for me to become accurate, and not to anticipate the trigger pull and all these things. And because I knew that I was going to have to shoot a lot, that is one of the reasons that I got a more affordable cartridge. It allowed me to practice on a budget, and even if I wasn't shooting a more expensive hunting round, if I didn't care as much where it was going on paper, I was still able to practice shooting live rounds and working on the flinch, working on getting stabilized, working on shooting prone or sitting or off a pack or all these different things without, bankrupting myself.
Exactly. You pretty much nailed it. When you target practice, you have to have ammo to shoot. You're not going to shoot without ammo. You can learn trigger pull and how to properly pull a trigger without live ammunition. But to know how your rifle is shooting, to learn recoil management, how to shoulder your rifle, how to actually pull the trigger properly, because you can pull the trigger without live ammunition, but until you see downrange results, you don't know what to fix. You might think you're doing it right by firing maybe like a little cap that they put inside that's not a live ammunition. But when you actually are firing rounds downrange, sometimes you'll figure out like, oh, why am I hitting to the left so much? Or why am I hitting so much to the right? There's something that's consistent that you're not doing right, right? So it's like you need ammunition to hunt or to shoot, which is why a 308 or something more common is good because it's not as expensive to buy. Second, or I guess another thing is practice at a variety of distances. Don't just shoot 100 yards. If you're planning to hunt 300 yards, practice at 300 yards. Practice at 400 yards. Whatever it is, practice at those distances.
And not even just distances, but weather conditions too.
To close this out, I want to touch on some things that bother me that I see people do. And these are things you should never do. And I don't use the word never very often. These are things I, Samong, think no one should ever do. Number one, practice in sighting your rifle with one certain type of ammo. And then once it's sighted into that ammo, you go hunt and then put in new ammo in your rifle without ever firing that new box of ammo. Different types of ammunition will most likely shoot different out of your rifle. You might be dead on at 100 yards hitting the red bullseye with ammo A, but it might be match grade ammunition, for example. And you know it's not hunting grade ammunition. So you're like, okay, my rifle is dialed because I'm hitting the bullseye with this ammo. Now I'm just going to go hunt and I'm going to throw in hunting grade ammunition because my rifle's dialed. It's not the way it works.
And on top of that, a little bit less dramatic than that, but still a factor is if you're shooting and you're getting dialed in with your hunting ammunition, they make those in different lot numbers or different batch numbers, and your point of impact can actually change based on shooting the same exact ammo, same cartridge, everything, just in a new batch number. So if you have the opportunity to buy 2 or 3 boxes at a time from the same batch, and those are the ones you're practicing with, use the same ammo from the same box that's left for that hunt.
Most of the times you will be okay, but cough, cough, Hornady gave me that nightmare.
Yeah.
With the same for my 7 PRC. Same exact loads, bought at different years. 2024 loads shot like garbage. 2023 loads shot lights out. That's one thing. I do not recommend it. You can sight in your rifle. You can break in your barrel with one type of ammunition, but at the bare minimum, at least sight in your rifle to your hunting ammo or the ammo that you're going to hunt with.
Yeah.
Especially if you're shooting out to like 400 yards and you're doing your dope. Brings me to my next point. Never not confirm your bullet trajectory before you go out hunting. Today, we have all these ballistic apps where like you can just plug in your data. This is the bullet grain weight I'm shooting. This is the box velocity. This is the barrel length I have. This is the BC, ballistics coefficient. Plug it in. The chart spits out, or the app spits out a chart of your theoretical bullet drop and bullet drift in the wind. And then people call it good. The DOPE, D-O-P-E, is not a word. It's actually an acronym that just makes up a word. DOPE stands for Data on Previous Engagements, meaning you have confirmed that at 500 yards, my bullet is dropping this 40 inches and it's about 10 MOA. Mm-hmm. You have confirmed that because you have shot out to 500 yards. Don't just zero your rifle at 100 yards, plug in some information to an app, print out your DOPE chart, and then slap it in your scope and go hunting.
Yeah.
You're going to most likely not hit where you're aiming at or you're shooting at. Worst off, you're probably going to wound it. So do not do that. If you plan to shoot at extended ranges, 400 or 500 yards, confirm your DOPE. And then once you have confirmed your DOPE, write that stuff down and then put it somewhere where it's easily accessible. So how I do it is I either tape that DOPE chart to my stock, or what I've recently started doing is I put it on my scope. I tape it to my scope.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things that I see people do all the time, and it bugs me. And I don't recommend people doing it.
Well, after getting scolded by you here, let's move on to something more fun. Let's do some fast facts.
Let's do it. Oh, we're doing fast facts.
Fast facts.
You can go first.
Okay, I will go first then. According to Yosemite National Forest Search and Rescue, an average of 4,661 people are lost in the outdoors each year and require assistance to get out of the woods. That's on average 13 people a day. So this is nationwide. This is not in Yosemite. The research was done by Yosemite, but this is nationwide. On average, about 13 people a day get lost and need assistance by search and rescue to get out of the woods.
Wow.
Yeah. So after our podcast a couple weeks ago on SOS Basin, I got interested in wondering what the actual statistics are. And there was a whole bunch more statistics. I can maybe share a few of them in the coming weeks. But some of them are mind-blowing about how frequently and how high risk getting
So you're
lost.
telling me right now as we speak, somebody out there's just pressing SOS.
Well, I mean,
13 people
assuming
a day.
that each search and rescue needs probably multiple hours at minimum. I'm sure right now there is multiple search and rescue missions happening.
Folks, get that
nationwide.
Onyx hunt. Use code SY20.
Yeah, get Onyx, get Zolio, make a plan, talk to your friends and family.
Don't be like us.
The hunting in the backcountry stuff, as you know, it only matters if you're safe and you're having fun actually doing the hunting.
Awesome. That's a great statistic. My fast fact of the day. The term veganism is used to describe someone who only consumes wild harvested meats and fish.
Vegan? Like vegan with a W?
Yes. So veganism, except you replace the V with a W. Veganism is somebody who only consumes wild harvested meats and fish.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
So we all are descendants of vegans.
Yes. And then we have turned into some type of vegans, and then I don't even know what you call us.
Mixed.
Yeah, we're weird. There you go, folks. Those are our fast facts of the day. We hope this podcast was helpful, especially those of you who are looking to buy your first hunting rifle, or maybe you're just looking for another reason to buy another hunting rifle. Or maybe you have hunted, but you have not hunted elk, and you're kind of doubting your whitetail gun there in the Midwest or the East Coast. If you're already shooting a 308, you'd be just fine with that rifle.
We thought it'd be a fun topic because we kind of come from, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, different perspectives, different backgrounds, and I think both of them are equally interesting.
Yeah.
But
so, with that said, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know what your one do-it-all cartridge and rifle would be if you only had the option to use only one.
Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you guys next week. Next week, we're talking bears.
It's that time.
It's that time, folks. We're excited for fall bear season.
We are ready.
We hope you guys are excited too. We'll catch you right here next Tuesday, 5 o'clock a.m.